Hey, friends. This is Martine Williams, and I am obsessed with all things mompreneur life and helping you to remix your priorities, your habits, your mindsets, and yes, even your relationships so that you can build a successful business without losing yourself in the process. I'm also obsessed with the color turquoise and lyrics of the 80s and 90s, but that's beside the point. Girlfriend, you don't have to hustle 24/7, 365 and continue to sacrifice your health, your relationships, and your sanity to be a successful mompreneur. As a small town girl living in a lonely world to a six-figure mompreneur, I am here to teach you how. There is a better way, and this podcast is your one-stop shop for all of the how-tos, the encouragement, the life hacks, the success tips, and of course, a little side of tough love. This is the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. So let's do this. Friends, you're in for a real treat today with my Turquoise Talk guest, Alison Hall. We talk about common mistakes that new business owners make. We talk about kind of making that jump. So if you're in corporate America, or maybe you're in one profession and you're ready to move to another, we talk about that transition and what that looks like, how that feels. We talk about imposter syndrome. Like we go through lots of things in a short amount of time. But let me tell you a little bit about Allison. She is the founder of Change Agent Coaching. Love that name for women. And she is a passionate reinvention specialist. After 25 years of building a traditionally successful corporate career, she reinvented herself to become her own happy boss, launching several successful businesses. And for more than 10 years now, she has been using her financial expertise and in-depth understanding of human behavior to help women make smart, informed financial decisions around divorce and other major life-changing events, including starting your own business, which is what we focused on. Her mantra is knowledge is power. And with that in mind, she educates women about personal finance and business creation and development so that they're empowered to navigate life and career transitions confidently, lean into their strengths, find their purpose, and dump the shoulds and self-doubt. Amen to that. And reinvent themselves to create the lives they want and deserve. Her clients don't just chase dreams. They seize opportunities and they think beyond the expected to get what they really want. She taps into her own experience as a burned out, or you'll hear her say, rusted out, corporate grinder turned successful business owner to inspire women to embrace life-affirming change. As she likes to say, it's never too late to reach for a dream and grab it. If you only have one life to live, you better get cracking. And with that, let's do this. Welcome back, friends, to the Mompreneur Life Remix podcast. I'm your host, Martine Williams. I'm super excited today because we have another Turquoise Talk guest coming on the show today. And I'm really excited to always bring on guests that have different topics to talk about that I know will help you in your mompreneur life. And I'm really excited to have Alison Hall on today. So thank you so much, Allison, for being on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
So excited. So can you tell us just a little bit about, you, your family, like your journey into entrepreneurship before we kind of dive into some other things?
Sure. Yeah. I, like so many mompreneurs, I started out my career spending, just about 25 years in the corporate world. And I pretty much did all the things that I wanted to do. I don't think I necessarily burned out. I just kind of rusted out. I kind of lost my drive, the purpose, the whole thing. And really for years, I had wanted to do my own thing. So I consider myself now to be kind of a serialpreneur. I've started a number of different businesses, but the first one out of the bat, right out of the box was a fitness business for people like me who were corporate execs who didn't have a lot of time to get out and about. So our company, the women that I worked with, we went to them. So that was my first endeavor. I sold that business. And since then, I've started a few others. But now my main project is working with women a lot like myself who want to get into business or change their life in some kind of way. So, now I'm a coach.
I love it. And I love Change Agent. I'm sure you've read The Coffee Bean by John Gordon. I love that little book. And I've given that to so many of my peers. Before well, just this last year I left. I was in a direct sell company for 15 years and led, a multi-million-dollar organization. And I loved giving books because I'm a reader myself. And so when I saw your logo as change agent coaching for women, I just thought of that book. And I think it's amazing because we all do have that opportunity to be those change agents in our communities and our families and our businesses. So I know there's probably a lot of mompreneurs who are listening, that maybe this year is the year that they want to make that transition out of corporate America into, a new business, or they have this idea, or they just know, like, I'm done with this. Like you said, they're burnt out, they're rusted out, they're uninspired, and they just know there's more, right? I think over the last 3 years, we've all seen so much change and so much hardship and just uncertainty. And for a lot of people, that's been the catalyst to transition out of corporate and to start their own businesses. So can you talk a little bit about that transition? Because it's not easy. I know for me, leaving, the business and the company that I thought I would be with forever was a hard transition, but it was the right transition. It doesn't mean it was easy. It was just the right transition. So can you just share a little bit about your transition story and just something that would encourage those who are like, I know I need to do this, but I'm scared, or I know this is the right thing, but what do I do? Like, what are my first steps,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that one of the biggest things that I've come across with me and people that I've worked with is that paralysis. Like, you feel like everything has to be perfect. All the stars have to be fully aligned before you make a move. And I certainly would never tell anybody, just leap before you look. I would never say that, but you don't have to have everything right. In fact, you don't even have to have your last best business idea. It just has to be your first one. And as long as there's an audience for what it is that you want to do, it can be a small audience. As long as there's somebody who's interested in what it is that you're offering, that's your first opportunity. And again, you may take that all the way, that may be the business that you do and grow forever, or it may be just your jumping off point. So I think that giving yourself permission to just make a move is really the first thing. That was what it was for me. I was fortunate that I didn't have, big monetary issues. I was in a comfortable enough space. I mean, was I multi-billionaire? No, absolutely not.
Right.
But, I prepared, I made a plan. I didn't take a year. I took probably about a month to really make the leap. And I think just, again, knowing that you have an opportunity is just the first move. The second thing is, once you get your big, bright idea, make sure it's a good, bright idea. Not every idea is most ideas make a good hobby. Not every hobby makes a good business. So that's really, and I know you've probably talked about that with lots of your guests, because that is where some of us go wrong, especially during the pandemic. I think a lot of people, we started knitting, we were baking bread, we were doing all sorts of things. Yeah. That is not necessarily for everyone going to be the way that you're going to make a living. And if that's what your goal is to get out of corporate or get out of whatever it is you're doing and make a living, you have to be realistic about it.
Yeah. I think that's such a good point, because there are a lot of things that we can be passionate about, as women, but it may not be the thing that's going to be the monetized, passion. I mean, some passions will pay you and can pay you. And if you find that, that's amazing. But there's also, like you said, we have to be realistic about, is it something that people want? And so if she's thinking that, and I know you like to talk about just what are some effective ways for her to figure out what the right business is to kind of launch, what would you say to her? What are some steps to think about?
Yeah. And that's such a great question that everybody asks themselves, right? How am I going to pick something? Because I think we are all sort of, we all kind of have the thought that, well, gosh, I should have this great passion that is going to be my purpose and mission in life. And why can't I figure out what that is? That's what I talk to people about so often. Mm-hmm. And you feel as if you're a little bit deficient if you don't have that one perfect thing that you're so great at. And gosh, right. I could do this for the rest of my life. You can start small. Sometimes it's simply a matter of thinking about the people that you want to surround yourself with. Who do you want to help? And then kind of finding a niche and providing a service or a product to help the people that you want to work with. Sometimes it's a matter of, I've worked with, I didn't mention this, but, I have a business where I work with women who are in the process of getting divorced, and I help with the financial ends of that. But one of the reasons I got into coaching was because very often as divorced women, the income that you were bringing in isn't going to now support your new family dynamics. And so I ended up helping women create business ideas out of things that they were already doing or groups of people that they were already providing for in a way. You know, sometimes you might have been volunteering with churches, for instance, helping people do taxes or something. Yeah. If that's a skill that you have, and you may not even be trained to do something like this, but you just be willing to get additional education, that might be something that maybe you could start your own business doing taxes. And I use that as an example because that's one of the women I worked with. That's what she ended up doing. You know, she had a 9-to-5 job, but she was going to have her kids all the time. So she needed to be able to be flexible. And so we thought of something that she had already been doing and just was able to monetize that. But again, sometimes thinking about who it is that you want to work with is a great starting off point.
Yeah.
A lot of times we think about the things that we enjoy doing. And again, as we just said, if you do have a passion and you're able to monetize it, it's really just about making sure, though, that you do your analytics. And again, that's, business plan is obviously the first thing that you want to do. But before you even get to that, really think deeply about taking time to get out a piece of paper and write down who's my consumer going to be and where are they? How do they buy? Is this something that they would actually buy in terms of a service? So, really taking the time to do a deep dive analysis is really helpful.
Well, and not being afraid to ask your people, is this something you would invest in? I think we feel like we have to figure all that out and then present it, when really you can waste a lot of time and money doing it that way, instead of like just asking the questions of the people, like, what are they coming to you for? Are they coming to you for that all the time? Well, that might be an idea, but you want to, before you fully birth it, like, let's put it out there and say, hey, is this something y'all would be interested in? Let's start, what would you, how much time do you need for that? I just think being really curious of your audience is super important when you're thinking about starting a business, and just learning. They'll tell you if you ask them. You don't have to try to figure it out. I mean, now with social media, it's so easy to get market research and so easy to really ask your people, and they want to help, and they like to co-create businesses. And they like to kind of help you with that. And they're more invested when you involve them in the process. So I am definitely one of those people who likes to have the full blueprint. And when, I felt called out of my 16-year career into like no man's land and not really sure what I was going to do there. Like, I'm like, okay, I'd like to have all the plan and the blueprint, and that's just not, action brings clarity, so we have to just take that action, take that step. And now I'm not telling everyone on this that they should leave their 15-year career without having a plan. I'm not saying that. But we were kind of like you in a place financially where we had been good stewards of our finances and was able to kind of step into that season in that way. But that's, I know, unique and not something that I'm recommending for everyone to do. But what are go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and to your point about using social media, even if you're not a social media person, if you're thinking about a service kind of a business, you can jump on Meetup and start a Meetup group doing what it is that you want to do, and see kind of, use those people as your test case folks. And, I've had clients who've done that, and it's been very successful. And sometimes the feedback is not at all what you expected you were going to get. Sometimes it leads you in a different direction, but just getting out there and doing something, getting it out of your head, as you said, taking action can be extremely valuable.
Yeah. And when I've tried to kind of coach women before on this, I find that sometimes they're too close to their strengths and their giftedness that they think is just ordinary. And like, well, everybody has that, or no one is interested in that, and that's just not true. We all have different gifts and talents and things and purposes to bring to the table. But when they're thinking about, okay, well, how would I monetize that? They think, well, that's just ordinary. Everybody has that skill set. And so can you speak to that a little bit? Maybe like someone who's thinking like she can't see the amazingness that she has in her, or she's struggling with imposter syndrome. Like, she's like, okay, I know I need to do this, but who am I to do this? Who am I to offer this service? Who am I to become a coach? Or who am I to start this business and help people with their finances? I don't even have a certification. Like
Right.
expertise and your experience is experience, and that qualifies you, I feel like.
Absolutely. Expertise qualifies. Yeah. Just having life experience qualifies you to do so many things, but also having that, that growth mindset that I can do whatever I want to do as long as I'm open to the fact that I might have to get some additional education, or if I, maybe I have a bend toward real estate, I'm really interested in it. Yes, I might have to get a license, things like that, having that openness and willingness. But to your other point, sometimes we can't even see the forest for the trees. We're so, used to our own lives and what we think are our strengths and expertise. Sometimes it's just as simple as talking to your friends about, what do you think are my strengths? And then being honest with yourself, just making a list. Sometimes it's just about sitting with yourself and thinking about the things that people come to you for, or things that you've done throughout your career. Everything that you've done in your career doesn't necessarily boil down to the titles that you've had. You may have, managed people and you don't even think about that fact. Maybe that's something that you're really good at. And as you're looking at what your next career is going to be, maybe you are that person who wants to develop people or something like that. Or to that point, maybe that's something you want to get away from. Sometimes sometimes one thing I've noticed that people can often do coming from a corporate career, they then go into business for themselves and kind of create the same dynamic that they were trying to get away from. So it's it's just as important to look at your strengths. It's also important to look at the things that were burning you out or rusting you out or whatever in the first place, and not create that same dynamic down the road.
Yeah. So since we brought up burnout and rust out, I love that. It is a question I like to ask each one of my guests that come on, because that's something I'm super passionate about with mompreneurs and helping them. That's why it's the Remix podcast, because remixing your priorities, your mindsets, and things like that help to prevent your burnout. So when you were burned out, rust out, what were you feeling? I think it's really important for people to know that it shows up differently for some people. Some people, it's just a feeling of being uninspired. For others, it's exhaustion, it's overwhelm. And when you found yourself in that place, how did you kind of work your way out of it? Because there's someone listening today that feels exactly like you felt after 25 years or being in corporate, or even if you are a mompreneur and you have the luxury of being able to work from home now, it doesn't mean you're free from burnout. It can happen to anybody at any time. So can you kind of share what your experience has been with that?
Yeah. I mean, in my corporate world, it felt like, I think so many people can relate to this, that I hated Sundays because Sundays led into Monday. I couldn't sleep. My stomach hurt. It was just that constant dread. And I mean, that's a huge sign that you're not doing something that's aligned with where you should be in life. But there was also that feeling of, even at work, just feeling as if my purpose for myself didn't align with the corporate purpose, that what I was doing every day wasn't adding value in any kind of meaningful way. It didn't mean that my role wasn't important within the organization. It just wasn't important to me. And I never had, I'm fortunate that I never had like a physical breakdown. I know that happens to a lot of people. It was just a constant feeling of dread and just low level illness in my stomach, just constantly, And again, Sunday night was just, misery. And even leading up to the weekend, it gets to a point where Thursday and Friday feel kind of horrible too, because it's leading to the weekend that's not going to last long enough,
Yeah.
So, but then, in the first business that I had, my fitness business, I had a similar situation. I mean, I definitely had a burnout there because I was doing everything. I did hire other trainers, but I mean, like so many entrepreneurs, you're wearing all of the hats. And that's when I realized that the reason I had gotten into this was because I was big on working out and I knew that there was a need. I did all the right things, but I worked myself up into a position that I didn't want, which was CEO of my own company. And I think that's a different kind of burnout that I think entrepreneurs often face. And sometimes you have to be honest with yourself and realize maybe you're not the person to be the CEO of your own company. Maybe that's not the role for you. Maybe you are better at, you can be head of marketing, or maybe you actually want to be in the business and not running the business. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think a lot of times, particularly as women, we feel like we do have to do all the things. And if we're not, we started this business, of course, I'm supposed to be the head of it. Or, sometimes we put ourselves in a position we don't even need to be in. So I find, so that's why I sold that business. But now I'm their kind of CFO in a box. Quarterly, I meet with them and help them stay on track economically, financially. But I'm not running that business, and it freed me up to do things that I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a good point. And it's really like the work that I get to do with my one-on-one clients now with as a certified PDP professional is really helping them to see what their true strengths of their personality are. And are they in alignment with the roles and the positions that you have in your businesses? And it doesn't mean you can't still own your own business if you don't have those CEO personality strengths, but you have to surround yourself with the people who can be those people. And I'm reading a book right now called Traction. Have you read that book?
I haven't. No.
I keep bringing up books, but I love to read. It's by, it's sitting right here. It's by Gino Wickman. But he talks about having the right people in the right seats, and including yourself as the business owner. Like, are you in the right seat? In the beginning, you are playing all the roles and you're wearing all the hats, but eventually as you build your leadership team, you have to be able to, he calls it letting go of the vine, just being able to let go of some of those things and making sure you have the right people in the right seats. And maybe you aren't the CEO role, right? You could still be the owner and not be the CEO of the business. And I think that's sometimes we don't have the right people in the right seats, including ourselves, which is what leads to burnout. We're trying to be someone that we're not. We're trying to operate in strengths that are not ours. And in the beginning, listen, we're wearing all the hats and all the roles. We just are. That's just the way it is. But it's really important early on, probably way before you think you can invest or can afford help, you have to hire it out and make sure you have the right people in the right seats. So if you haven't read that, I would recommend you reading that too. Hey, friend. So you have been trying to make some shifts this year. Maybe you set some resolutions and you're just feeling stuck. You don't feel like you're making progress, or you're just not sure what to do. And you've heard me say this before, but being stuck is a mindset, not a position. And this is where a coach comes in to support you. Because here's what I know to be true about you, friend. If you could have done it alone, you would have already done it, period. And as a life coach and a certified PDP professional, I specialize in using a research-based personality and performance survey called the ProScan to illuminate how your unique personality and natural strengths, your work and life environments are influencing real-time performance. So here's what you need to do. Go to the link in the show notes and book your free clarity call to learn more about how I can support you in your goals. I can't wait to illuminate your strengths, cultivate your confidence, and elevate your life. So let's talk a little bit about the 11 common mistakes new business owners make. And I don't know if that's specific to finance. I know that's something you really like to talk about too, but I'm sure finance is involved in there. But can you share, like, what are some of the common mistakes?
Sure.
So the person that's listening is like, I'm ready to go, but I don't want to make these mistakes. Which one? Help her with that.
Exactly. And we've kind of hit on some of the initial ones, like having a business plan. Even if it's just you, sometimes it feels like, gosh, I just want to get started. I don't want or need a business plan. It's just me. Who's going to see it? I'm not going out to borrow money or anything like that. The business plan is the crux of, I'm sure you've talked about this on your program. That's the crux of everything. If you don't have a plan, where are you going to go from there? And your plan includes, again, as we mentioned before, talking about who is the audience for what it is that you're offering. So if you can't get deep into your business plan with regard to who it is that you're serving and what you're serving, then what is it that you're going to be doing going forward? Okay, so that's number one. That's an obvious one. But one small little thing is, once you get started, people very often, I've had this a lot in my financial side of my career, forgetting about taxes altogether, taxes and insurance, Even in your first year, if you can just make sure to leave a percentage, even when you make a deposit, if it's just automatically part of it goes into a little separate savings account. I've worked with so many people in my tax planning world where that was exactly what had not transpired. So rather than planning for the future, we're paying, money to the past.
Yeah.
Ignoring the competition, just because you have a great idea doesn't mean there's not somebody out there who's already doing it. It seems really simple, because sometimes people come up with something that's relatively unique. There aren't that many things that are extraordinarily unique, though. So there might be somebody who's doing something similar. Pay attention, see what it is that they're doing, and can you make a better mousetrap? And sometimes making the better mousetrap isn't just about doing better. Sometimes you're not just differentiating yourself based on your product. Sometimes it's about the pricing. Sometimes it's about service. And then again, quality. Like Zappos is a great example. I mean, you probably, we all buy shoes, but what they're known for.
Yes, it's all about the shoes for me.
But what they're known for is their great customer service, right? You could get your shoes somewhere else. You get it at DSW, wherever. But even during the pandemic, they continued to do their, service thing by people love talking to their customer service folks. And they just opened up lines during the pandemic. Like you don't even have to be calling to buy something. You could just call and talk to her. So they dialed into what their differentiator was. So find what your niche is. Everybody talks about niche, but my point is that niche doesn't have to be, I work with women who are 25 to 30, that's part of it. But your niche can be just one little thing that differentiates you from somebody else.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. One thing that can kind of lead you down a rabbit hole is either over-analysis or under-analysis. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we let ourselves fail I use air quotes. Sometimes we let ourselves fail in a business because we get so anxious early on that we don't allow ourselves to see it through. Deciding that it's not going well, or we need to change something before you've really given it a chance to percolate long enough to know, is it really, or changing too many things all at once. So then you have no idea which one was the variable that was the problem child. No idea. We changed everything. The other is under analysis, where you are just set on your path. You've decided this is the way. I know somebody wants this. You may not have done enough analysis to know that there is somebody who wants it. And you see it through, and you just 10 years later, you just still can't understand why, this isn't really a moneymaker. So it's not deep things. It's obviously finance is always something you've got to know your business. Even if you're not a numbers person, you just have to know some very, very basic, simple things, and you can't outsource that permanently to somebody else. You can have an accountant, but you need to understand the information that they bring to you. And I think there's plenty of examples, big, well-known examples of people who outsourced and then lost everything, So those are some of the main ones. I have a little free report that kind of lists all of them, because they're simple. When you read them, you're like, oh my gosh, yes, of course. But these are the exact, of course, things that people forget and don't do. I know one of your guests, you had a couple of different guests that I really enjoyed. I've enjoyed most of your guests. But one was talking about making sure that you have the right business arrangement, whether it's an S Corp or whether you're an LLC, making sure that you protect yourself early on. There's no reason not to do that. It's really inexpensive to do. Making sure that you have insurance, even if you're a service provider like a coach, having insurance to protect your personal assets and make sure that, you don't lose everything because somebody thinks that you gave them bad advice. And it's simple. It's relatively inexpensive. Yeah. Yeah. So there are a lot of very simple, basic things that we cannot do that will set us on a path to failure. So a little bit more just on finances. When you are coaching women in their businesses, and do you coach service providers that create their own products and services and things like that? Yes. Okay. Are they women? Well, exclusively women. Yes.
Okay. So I know you've heard this, or I know you have coached women probably through this, is the pricing, the drama around pricing. How should I price my offer? How should I price my product? Just all of the mental Olympics that goes on in a woman's head when it comes to sales and finances. It's real, and especially if it's something that you've created, it's a product you've created or a coaching service you're going to provide. And you just kind of go through like I said, the mental Olympics of, who am I? Again, kind of this imposter syndrome to charge this. Is this the right price to charge? So have you coached someone through that? And if you have, what were some helpful things that you helped them to understand about pricing and all of that?
Yeah. And I think, and pricing is always, you're right. It's always a topic of, because of course, it's the crux of everything. What am I going to charge? And so different people come out from different perspectives in terms of the problem that they have in their head, or the problem they've made in their head about pricing. So I've worked with people who come into it thinking, with respect to imposter syndrome, well, I'm, let's say, a coach or some sort of an artisan. Well, I'm new at this. That's the first thing to take out of your head. Being new at anything is irrelevant. Because when you think about your customer base, typically your customer has no idea where they're marching, unless you tell them. They have no idea where they're coming into the longevity of your business, right?
Right.
You could have been in business for a week or 10 years for all they know. They just know that you have something that they want. And if you've done all, if you've arranged this and done all your research, then you're already offering a quality product. Right. So sometimes you go into it looking at it like, okay, well, if I'm new at this and somebody else has been doing this longer and they're charging this, then I'm going to go down to here. Well, as soon as you do that, it's very difficult to raise your rates. You've already just put yourself at a disadvantage because you're basing it on somebody else's experience, number one, and you've already made an assumption that their pricing is adequate or accurate or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then we have people who come in thinking, well, what I'm offering is crazy unique. It's just nobody else is doing this. Not necessarily having a lot of, information to back that up. And you pick a price that hasn't been tested anywhere. There's no A/B testing. You haven't really talked to anybody about it. Maybe you've asked your friends, hey, would you pay blah, blah, blah for this? Well, your good friends are probably going to say yes because they're supportive, but that's not based in any kind of reality,
Right. Yeah.
So I've worked with people who had to do some price testing, almost offering the exact same thing, but at different prices to see how, and that's kind of a double test because you're testing your marketing and your pricing. Yeah. But you do get some accurate information in that regard. But I think one of the things that women typically do, at least the women I've worked with, is underprice and undercut yourself and sell things at a discount, constantly putting things on, 40% off or whatever, especially services. Products, sometimes it makes sense. Maybe you're highlighting a product at that point. But in terms of just when you get started in pricing, there's no need to discount yourself. And you also have to do the math to determine, especially if you're working for yourself hour by hour, how much is my time worth? How much was it worth in the corporate world, allegedly? And what is my time worth in terms of other things that I could be doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I know for me, one of the thought blocks that I have had and had to work through is this trading time for money. Right. And, if they're getting an hour session with me, trying to put a value on that when really it's not just that hour session. They're not paying you for that hour session. They're paying you for the result they're going to get. Right. And your experience of over 15 years or however long, whoever's listening, however long you've been in your business, I remember a story, and I think it was Picasso or one of the famous painters, and he was sitting in a coffee shop and someone came up to him and asked them to paint a picture or sketch a picture of him. And he did it in like 10 minutes. And I forget, like some astronomical number he charged for it. And they were like, it only took you 10 minutes. And he was like, no, it took me a lifetime of learning and crafting my skill. Just because it took me 10 minutes now doesn't mean it's not worth more. And so I think a lot of women do struggle with that too. Like, okay, well, I should put a value on this hour when that's not really what they're paying you for, is that time.
Exactly. And that's a great point with respect to time too. As a coach, you're aware of this. You may give an hour of time and accomplish all kinds of different things depending on who the client is. And also you could take 20 minutes, right? I mean, point being, you could structure your practice such that, well, what I need to accomplish can be accomplished in 20 minutes. I may still charge the same amount that I would charge for an hour of time because I'm able to get those results in 20 minutes. Point being, there are all kinds of you don't have to copy what everybody else is doing. There are all kinds of ways to, as long as you're adding value. And you are the only person. I mean, yes, we all have market forces and there's competition. Generally, if you're offering something that is not particularly unique, yes, you are much more constrained by market pricing. But if you are adding something, you're adding value, you're adding quality, you're, adding results, then you are the arbiter of what it is that you charge. And I think that we as women, or just as human beings, have to own our own value and be confident that you are providing your client with something that they value, because that's the way we make purchases, right? You purchase something because it's giving you something that you need and want. Yeah. And you determine whether or not, is that worth $50 to me? Is that worth $100 to me? I
Right.
so admire. So, when you look out in the marketplace and you see people who value their artwork for exorbitant amounts of money, just as you pointed out, they know that they spent a lot of years, gaining that expertise. And as a coach, you've spent multiple years in business and as a human being, and that gives you the opportunity to provide great value. So yeah, we all have to get over ourselves and the imposter syndrome and just put on our big girl panties, got to make the bucks.
That's right. And I think when you realize, I came across a quote yesterday that I wanted to share on this topic, from a peer. Well, she's someone I've looked up to in the business. And she said, money is the measure of pleasure I can bring into the lives of others. Money is the measure of pleasure that I can bring into the lives of others. So when you think about exchanging, that transaction, the transformation is in the transaction. And when, people are invested more, you think about your own purchases into personal development or whatever, like when you purchase more, you got more skin in the game, you're going to show up and you're going to get a better result.
Right.
So I think understanding that too, that you're helping people get to the next level or a higher level of themselves when they have to invest a little bit more, right? And kind of go into that. So I know for me, if anyone's listening and this is an area that you struggle with, like I've really been intentional in every day, like writing out kind of a mantra about not just about money, because I don't really know that I struggle with a money mindset as much as like just the transformation that's going to happen, the impact that I'm going to have when someone has a transaction with me or service. So if you're struggling as a woman in business, find some really good like affirmations around money and around your service and around your impact. Yesterday, I literally just sat down and wrote down all of the reasons why the things I offer are amazing. And we need to be reminded of that, because the things like we dumb it down, I think sometimes, especially if you're in the service business or you're in coaching business or really any business, but we dumb down the impact we're going to have on our customers because we see someone else doing it, like you said, or someone's doing it different or doing it a different way. But you have a uniqueness because every human is unique. And what you bring to your customers is going to be just a little bit different because of the experiences you've had in your life than someone else. So I honestly love to collaborate with people who are in the same industry as me, because the way someone else may be a life coach is going to be different than the way I life coach,
Absolutely.
And we can learn from one another. So I think collaborate more than see it as a collaboration more than competition, because your only competition is who you were yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely.
Period.
That's so true. Yeah. I was talking to a woman who is a Reiki master, and she earned that, over time while she was working in corporate America. Now she's not anymore. And she has, starting her own business, and she was basing her pricing solely on what other people in her market were charging. But she was struggling with the fact that, well, she's not making enough money, basically, and when we talked about the fact that her sessions would go over, well, why are your sessions going over your alleged allotted amount of time? Because we're talking about the things that have come up and well, does everybody do that? Well, I don't know, but I know it's taken me longer. Well, you're probably adding a lot more, they're getting a lot more out of this experience than you are giving yourself credit for. And so you need to pay yourself for that, Yeah, absolutely. And with respect to collaboration, I'm with you on that. I love to collaborate, even with people who are in a field that is somewhat adjacent. I work with psychologists, referring people back and forth, but also, talking about how to, because our goals are the same, our methodologies are different. And so working together can be really enlightening and, just makes you feel like you're really adding value. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you had an opportunity to just encourage all the mompreneurs of the world, which I don't know that the world is listening to the podcast, but
sure they are.
What's maybe one day, what's one or two things you would want to make sure they all understood about being a mompreneur or being a business owner?
Yeah. I mean, one thing I think is bigger isn't always better. I think we talk a lot about, I'm all in favor of building and growing, and don't get me wrong, but sometimes bigger isn't necessarily the direction that's right for you. And it's okay to own that.
Yeah.
That nobody else is the determining factor around where you're going to go with your business. Maybe you just want to perfect it. You see that a lot in Japanese culture. When they manufacture things. They do them extraordinarily well. There's an example, you may have read about this, but there's an example of a woman whose only job is to put the little fine hairs on makeup brushes, but she does it so well that, how many of those can you do in a lifetime? So it's not about scale. It's not about getting bigger. She can only do as many as she can do, but she does them extraordinarily well. So point being, bigger isn't necessarily always better. Don't beat yourself up if that's not your goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we talked about differentiating yourself. There's so many ways to do that. And you don't have to be all things to all people. Try not to dilute your skills and talents by trying to accomplish too many things all at the same time, or being all the things to all the people. Find your true niche. And you might not find it at first. Be patient with yourself. We all have to be a little resilient. You're never going to, I shouldn't say never. It's a rare person who survives being a preneur of any kind without resilience. There's ups and downs, and it's not always just about money. Sometimes it's just about surprising yourself or thinking that you could do something and finding that you need more skills or talents. It's, but it's all about getting back up and dusting yourself off, keeping it moving.
That's right. It's a journey for sure. And it's not a sprint. And it's, as someone who has been in entrepreneur for 16 years and, just recently kind of changing some things, and even the coaching business for me, just reinventing that and rebranding and all of that, like you have to just get started. So if you're listening and you're like, I need all the details, Martine, Allison, I need all the details. I need the blueprint. Like you just have to get started, and you have to be willing to fail, and that doesn't make you a failure. It just means that idea didn't work. So like you said, dust yourself off and let's try something different. And you don't need to go it alone. I think that's really important for women to hear too. There's so many free communities. Podcasts are free. Some of my best mentors and coaches have come from listening to podcasts, which is why I wanted to start my own. But you don't have to go it alone. There are women who want to be in community with one another, to learn from one another, to support one another. And so find that community, find those people who can speak truth in love to you and let you hear some things you probably don't want to hear. But I just think you have to just get started. You have to stop the negative self-talk and just get started and see where it goes. And don't be afraid if it doesn't work. You can just try something different. There's endless opportunities out there. Would you not say? Even more now than ever before.
Oh my gosh, it's insane. And I think for anybody who's kind of on the bubble, once you make the leap, your mind just goes with you and says, yeah, I'm never going back there again. It's crazy. It doesn't matter how difficult it gets. Yes. It just becomes, you think that you're going to need this little blankie to hang on to, like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Why am I making this? And as soon as you go, even if your first foray is an abject failure, you know that you're not going back because you've already tasted it. And the worst thing that happens is not that bad, typically.
Right. Yeah. There's always another thing to try and to start. And you have lots of support. You have more support than you think. You always have support here on the podcast. And now you have a new friend, Alison Hall, so you can reach out to Allison too. So we'll put everything in the show notes. But is there any specific thing you have going on right now that you're super excited about that you want to tell them about, or we can just put your contact information in the show notes?
Yeah, my contact information. If you want to find me, I'm typically on LinkedIn. I don't do a lot of other social media. So that's but I wrote I mentioned to you, a couple of free reports for people. Some of the things, if you're just starting a business, to try to avoid or get right from the beginning. And also another report about, if you're looking into entrepreneurship, just some of the risks, pros, cons, those sorts of things. Just get your juices flowing in terms of, is this really right for me before you even make a move? So.
Okay. Well, we'll include those in the show notes for everyone. Sure. And I have not mastered LinkedIn. It is on my list to do. I'm on there. I've been on there for years and never did anything with it. And now, as a speaker, I know that's a really great place to hang out because people are constantly looking for speakers on LinkedIn. But I did my first official post last week, and I'm like, I don't even know if I did it right. Like I'm such an IG girl, and I love Instagram, but LinkedIn is making a comeback. I mean, a lot of people are talking about it, and so if you are on LinkedIn, go find Allison, and you can look for me. I don't know what you'll see there, but just go look for me, and you might find something good every now and then. But anyway, you and I should talk about that when we get off the recording. But
yeah, sure.
Thank you so much for coming on. This was super fun. You were very easy to talk to. And I know that everybody will be looking to connect with you on LinkedIn.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was amazing. It was really fun. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, friends, for joining this episode, and I will catch you on our next episode. Well, that's a wrap, friends, for this week's episode of the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. Thank you so much for listening and for following the show. It means so much to me. And listen, friend, sharing is caring. So if you loved this episode and thought of some fellow mompreneurs who could benefit, send them the link, share this episode, or take a screenshot and head on over to Instagram and share and tag me at Martine31Williams. We are connected on Instagram, right? It's where you will get all the fun behind the scenes of my life and business as a mompreneur. Until next time, know that I am believing in you always.